Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more of the Great War, and we're on to week 151, Italian Mountain Warfare. So, more Luigi Cadorna being a fucking dumbass. And the Espionage Act. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Okay, I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. By this time this uploads, I'll be playing Baldur's Gate 3. You should go check it out. Please give me views. Anyways, let's dive in.
The United States had joined the Allies 2 months ago and had begun building an army basically from scratch to bring to Europe and one day join the fight. For the Allies, that distant day couldn't come soon enough, but just thinking about it had begun to create incredibly unrealistic expectations.
I feel like expectations should be low for the United States military. By this point in time, you know? Like today, having high expectations from the US military is totally reasonable, right? Because of the amount of fucking money that they get. But back here in 1917, no. No.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week, an enormous explosion of nearly 20 mine tunnels heralded the Battle of Messines as the British blew up a large part of Messines Ridge and attacked a stunned enemy. On the Italian front, the 10th Battle of the Isonzo River came to an end. It was an Italian victory, but at the cost of over 150,000 casualties. General mutiny continued in the French army, and the draft was instituted in the United States. There was more news from the U.S. this week. On June 15th, the Espionage Act was passed. Although it did not provide for the censorship of the press that President Woodrow Wilson had wanted, it did make it a crime.
Of course Woodrow Wilson would want that. All my homies hate Woodrow Wilson. Fuck Woodrow Wilson. One of the worst.
To provide information with the intent to interfere with the operations of the U.S. Armed Forces, or information that helped the enemy achieve success. This was punishable by death or imprisonment of not more than 30
Whoa! Death? Well,
years. It also made it a crime to distribute false reports designed to aid the enemy or interfere with U.S. military operations, or to cause insubordination or disloyalty in American troops, or to obstruct recruiting or enlistment. These carried a fine of $10,000. Hell of a lot of money back then.
That's like $1 billion today.
Or a prison term of up to 20 years. It also allowed the Postmaster General to impound or to refuse to deliver publications that he believed violated the act. And on the 13th,
Damn, the Espionage Act is fucked up. Completely forgot how fucked up it was.
General John Pershing, chosen to lead the American Expeditionary Force, arrived in France from Britain. Pershing had spoken with King George V while in Britain, and the king mentioned rumors that the U.S. would soon have 50,000 aircraft in the air. Pershing was embarrassed by this exaggeration and told the king it would take some time to send over any planes at all, which was true. At the moment, the U.S. had exactly 55 training
Where the fuck did the 50,000 number come from? What?
planes, 51 of which were obsolete. There
That's even worse! He couldn't get... What?
was action in the skies over Flanders this week as the Battle of Messines drew to a close. Within 4 days of last week's explosion, the Germans had abandoned Weizsäck and Messines and retreated eastward. During the withdrawal, a 24-year-old German pilot got his first aerial victory. With his whole squadron watching from the ground, Hermann Goering, yes, that Hermann Goering, shot down an Allied plane after a dogfight.
Damn. Okay. 1893?
For the battle, all British objectives were taken within days. But the cleaning up phase of the battle had been dear, and they had still taken 24,562 casualties. Messines Ridge was now under British control, and the way was open for British Commander Sir Douglas Haig's offensive against the German lines that nearly encircled Ypres. There was action in the skies over Britain as well this week. On the 13th came a daytime raid on London by 14 German bombers. 162 people were killed, 432 injured. This was that city's highest daily death toll of the war. I'm actually going to mention another future Nazi now. German officer Rudolf Hess wrote to his parents about the state of the post-revolutionary Russian army facing
I always forget how fucking long this fucker lived. Holy shit.
him. Yesterday we saw heavy fighting, but only among
Let's really look at this. How long this man lived. Born 24 years after German unification. Lived through World War I, saw the disillusionment of that German monarchy into a democracy, saw and took part in that democracy falling and becoming an authoritarian fascist state, witnessed the fall of that authoritarian fascist state, and nearly saw the end of the Cold War. And really, 1987, you could say he kind of saw the end of the Cold War. He just didn't get to really see the collapse of the Soviet Union. That's, God damn.
Revolutionary Russian army facing him. Yesterday we saw heavy fighting, but only among the Russians themselves. A Russian officer came over and gave himself up. He spoke perfect German. He told us that whole battles are going on behind their lines. Their officers are shooting each other, and the soldiers are doing the same. We invited him to eat with us, and he thanked us. There was a lot of noise coming from the Russian side yesterday. They were fighting each other in the trenches. Some of that sounds similar to what was going on in France, where the mutiny in the French army continued in force. Tens of thousands of soldiers had taken part by now, many of them simply deserting, some waving the red flag and singing the Internationale, some uncoupled rolling stock on the railways, some even attacked the military police. But for most of them, the mutiny meant a simple and blunt refusal to go over the top. They would still man the trenches, but would take part in no more suicidal offensives like the one 2 months ago. And as I said last week, the main complaints were low pay and lack of leave. Think about it. In the entire 10-month Battle of Verdun last year, the average soldier had gotten no leave at all. They faced death daily and lived in terrible conditions while, say, an industrial worker back home lived with his family and got higher wages to boot. It seemed like it would take pretty strict measures to stop the mutiny and restore order to the French army, and by now, arrests were being made en masse. But so far, French commander Philippe Pétain showed no signs of coming down with anything seriously repressive, though on June 10th, the first 2 mutineers sentenced to death were shot. Pétain began the formidable task of going around and speaking in person to every single regiment that had seen mutiny. Another offensive from 2 months ago was also now seeing repercussions. The British had fought 2 battles at Gaza against the Ottomans, losing them both. The second was a particularly harsh defeat, with the British failing in all of their tactical objectives and taking over 6,000 casualties, even though they had outnumbered the enemy 2-1. Repercussions were swift. Sir Charles Dobell was relieved of his command in the field by Lieutenant General Sir Philip Chetwood, who had commanded the Desert Column of the Anzac and Imperial Mounted Divisions. Major General Sir Harry Chauvel took command of them now. The biggest change, though, was the arrival in June of General Sir Edmund Allenby, commander of the British Third Army on the Western Front, who had recently fought the Battle of Arras over there. He was now in the Middle East to replace Sir Archibald Murray. And this was a pretty big sign that the British were not planning on letting this campaign falter. Murray had done wonders with logistics and administration, and it was hoped that Allenby would do the same to field operations. He would move headquarters forward to the Palestine border and reorganize his army's structure on more formal lines, creating the Desert Mounted Corps under Chauvel, the 20th Corps under Chetwood, and the 21st Corps under Lieutenant General Edward Bulfin. There was one disastrous offensive just getting started this week.
Of course there was. Of course. Good job. Good job, Luigi Cadorna. I just know he's behind this one.
On the Italian front. This was an Italian attack in the Trentino. An Italian Army Chief of Staff Luigi Cadorna resolved to overwhelm the enemy. The Sixth Army, under General Ettore Mambredi, had 200,000 men and 100,000 reserves. The Austrians had a third of that, but they had very strong positions and their artillery was very well positioned. They also had details of the plans from Italian deserters, so they were ready. The objective was a chain of 4 peaks. The attack was a disaster. Low clouds meant that the Italian artillery couldn't target the Austrian barbed wire, and heavy rains had turned the mountainsides into mud. The men of the 52nd Alpine Division who went over on the 10th did manage to take Mount Ortegara, hacking their way up with daggers and bayonets, but Austrian storm troops retook it with gas and flamethrowers. However, the Italians took enormous casualties and were trapped on the mountainside the rest of the week, waiting for an order to retreat that never came. And there they remain. But to the southeast, someone didn't remain. King Constantine of Greece abdicated in favor of his son Alexander. This was after an Allied ultimatum on the 11th. Constantine, whose wife was the Kaiser's sister, had kept Greece neutral in spite of repeated Allied demands. The opposition, led by Eleftherios Venizelos, had long ago declared its support for the Allies, and the country had been kind of in a state of civil war. Now the Allies blatantly disregard Greek neutrality and occupy Corinth and Larissa. And that brings the week to an end. A new and deadly offensive in Italy, the end of a brief one in Flanders, chaos.
You know, Germany and Austria-Hungary do some fucked up things in this war. But at least when they get involved in a neutral country, they just invade. The Allies are just pretending that, like, no, we are here to save you, right? We're here to protect you. At least one's more honest.
In the Russian army and the French army, and new British leadership in the Middle East. And exaggerated British dreams at home. 50,000 aircraft. That's what the king thought the Americans were bringing. Britain had fewer than 1,000 currently on the Western Front, so that's a pretty fantastic dream. But think of the king. After 3 years of seeing his army at a stalemate, being unable to break through on any front, and seeing millions of his young men killed and maimed, I guess sometimes
I don't think he cares about the young men being killed or maimed.
all you really can do is dream. If you have ever dreamed of seeing a handful, not 50,000, but a handful of the original remaining World War I airplanes at an original World War I aerodrome, and if you've also ever dreamed of meeting me and the crew of the Great War,
I think I'm a few years late for this one.
you should check out Stowe Mary's Great War Aerodrome and their event Stowe Mary's at War. Details in the doobie-doo. If you want to
Did you just say the doobie-doo?
his Great War Aerodrome and their event Stowe Mary's at War. Details in the doobie-doo.
What? That was Italian Mountain Warfare, the Espionage Act, the Great War Week 151. I have nothing to add here at the end. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.